In this lesson, we'll talk about some of the common light attributes found in Cinema 4D. Okay, so I'm just going to begin with this relatively simple scene, and we'll use this to demonstrate a lot of the light attributes that are going to be common and found on almost all of Cinema 4D's light types. So let's start by just going up to our shelf, and let's drop in a simple omnidirectional light. There we are. Now we'll just take this light, move it up here for the sake of demonstration, so it's a little bit easier to see. Now with this light selected, if we come down here and take a look in the Attribute Manager, we have a lot of different light attributes, and you can see there's actually quite a few attributes to be found in here. So some of these we'll talk about in this lesson. There's a few that we'll talk about in the next lesson as well. For now, let's talk about some of the attributes found in this General tab. So here in this General tab, this is where we can start to control things like the light color and the light intensity. So at the moment, you can see that this light is pretty much just emitting a white light. Now, if we wanted to, we could have this light maybe be more of a red color. So you can see we change the color here. And you'll also notice that the light icon here in the viewport also changes its color to reflect that new color that we've assigned to it. So sometimes makes it a little bit easier to actually tell exactly which light is which. If you have lots of different lights in your scenes that are emitting lots of different colors, this is actually really helpful. Now, below the light color, we also have controls for light intensity. So as we start to take that slider and drag that down, we can start to make our light a little bit more dim or a little bit more bright. We can actually take this intensity value and crank this up past 100% if we need to, if we really need to have a bright light source. Now below this, we have the light type menu. Now here, we can actually change any light type in Cinema 4D to any other light type. So if you're in this type of a situation and you have, let's say, an omnidirectional light, and you decide that maybe at some point, maybe an infinite light would work a little bit better. Well, instead of taking this light, deleting it, and then creating a whole new infinite light, what you could do, just take your existing light source, come down to the light type, and then switch that from omni to infinite. And there we go. Now we have a brand new infinite light created from our existing omni light. And you can see it maintains all the same light color, light intensity attributes that we had set on the light previously. So really nice, useful feature to have. Below this we have the shadow type. Now we'll actually talk about this a little bit more in the next lesson. So for now, we're just going to move past that. Now below here we have a few checkboxes that we can start to enable or disable if we want to start to control the light a little bit more precisely. Now to make this just a little bit easier to see, we maybe just come in here and I'll take this light to something a little bit lighter in color. Now here we can start to control whether or not we have diffuse or specular components. So again, to make this just a little bit easier to see, what I'll do is take my existing light, and I'll switch this to a world mode so it's a little bit easier for me to work with. And let's maybe just start by taking this and switching it from an infinite back to an omni. Again, this will make what I'm about to show you a little bit easier to see. So let me just duplicate this light. Again, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And I'll take this duplicate light source and move it over here, so that way we have two different lights in my scene. So let's go to this first light here, this one that's over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And let's start by taking a look at its diffuse checkbox. So the diffuse is pretty much the visible light that we see. Now each of these lights can have a diffuse component or specular component. So diffuse, you can see as we turn that off, the light is no longer emitting any new light into the scene, but it does still have this sort of a specular highlight, this little shine on it. So if we have lots of different lights in our scene, or maybe if we only have one light that we want to have casting visible light, but maybe for the sake of artistic purposes, maybe we want to have just a little bit of an extra highlight in a certain area. We can just place a new light, turn off its diffuse so it's not interfering with the existing light, and now we get just a nice little highlight here. Now we could do the opposite as well. So we could turn on its diffuse, and let's say maybe we have lots of different lights in our scene, but we really only want a specular highlight to be coming from one of the lights. Maybe we don't want a whole bunch of different specular highlights ruining the visuals of this. So we could just take our light, go down to its specular component, and turn that checkbox off. You can see now for this light that I have selected, that little specular highlight disappears, but it's still casting visible light into the scene. So lots and lots of control that we have here, and this is really nice to have. Now, one last thing that I want to show you before we wrap up this lesson is the controls for the visible light. So again, just to make this a little bit easier to see, what I'll do is just take some of these existing lights that I have here, and I'll just delete those out of my scene. And what I'll do is turn on this platonic from my object manager here. So let's come in and turn off both these traffic lights. And what I have with this platonic is just a simple object here with a few faces that have been deleted out. So let's come in here and drop in just a simple Omni light. And I'll place that sort of right inside of this little platonic here. Now with the visible light, by default, it is set to none. Now what these allow us to do is control basically the effect of a volumetric substance. So light shining through fog or smoke, things like that. So if I turn on visible, you'll notice now around this light we have this little widget that shows up. If I press Alt-R on my keyboard, now we can actually see this light sort of appears as though it's kind of shining through fog. We can also take this light and instead of maybe just having it simply be sort of in a fog type substance, we could set this to a true volumetric light. So as I turn that on, now you can see the light is actually interacting with the different objects in my scene, and now I sort of get these really, really nice little rays of light. Now, once we start to enable these volumetric lights, then we can start to go over into this visibility tab and start to control some of the different behaviors of this volumetric. So here we can start to control the inner and outer distance. So if we wanted this volume to be really sort of shrunk in and occupy only a really small area, we can start to dial that outer distance down. Likewise, if we wanted to make it seem really, really bright, like there's a lot of fog in this scene, we can start to take this outer distance and start to crank that up. We can also come down toward the bottom and start to adjust things like the dust and dithering. So if we wanted to make this maybe a little less uniform and maybe sort of feel like there is some sort of a volume here, maybe not just a pure vacuum, we could start to take that dust and start to increase that. It just kind of helps to break this up a little bit more and start to make that feel maybe just a little bit more irregular. Okay, so that's a look at just a handful of these attributes that, again, are going to be found on almost all of Cinema 4D's light types. Now, in the next lesson, we'll dedicate the entire lesson to just talking about shadows in Cinema 4D and the difference between some of the different shadow types.